Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to J Raids and welcome to another Raid Challenge video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic day so far. In today's video, we're back with another PvP meta report, and in today's video, I want to talk about something a little bit differently. I want to talk to you guys about how you guys can level up your arena game and focus on what parts of the game that you guys should be focusing on in order to best progress your account to do better in PvP. I know that sounds a little bit generic, but I promise you guys, I'm going to break it down for you and make it very clear in what kind of areas you guys should be focusing on and really investing your resources in to improve and get further along in order to get better and be more successful in the arena. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. So first things first, I want to talk to you guys about how I think about how arena is broken down into and how your account is contributing towards how powerful of an arena setup you have. And I've broken down this into 4 different buckets. We have, of course, I think everyone is pretty clear on this, but we have our champions and our gear. And then on the right side, we have a little bit more of the qualitative side. You know, we have things like our knowledge and our micro decisions. So starting with the champions, I think this is fairly straightforward, but of course, having better champions situated for the arena is always a plus. And this is important, but not just having specific champions, but also having a wide variety of champions that fit a wider variety of roles, right? You don't want only like 5 really, really strong nukers, but having not great support champions, right? And so you need the good champions. They don't have to be the best in class per se in the arena, right? I'm not talking about the best mythicals in the game here, but I'm talking about having a good, strong set of nukers, a good, strong set of support champions, good, strong set of revivers. And gear is the sort of secondary aspect to that, making sure that you have gear that provides really good stats, but also having the right gear sets, because in arena, having, you know, gear sets and the bonuses that come with it is very, very important. Now, of course, on top of gear and going forward, this might continue to evolve and change. But when we think about what contributes to the power level of a specific champion, nowadays we have things like the relics, the blessings, and then so on and so forth, right? So as we progress further along, there will become more things that will help us boost our individual power level for each champions that will probably come from different aspects of the game. And finally, on the right side, we have a little bit more of the qualitative side. Again, we have things like the knowledge. So understanding, just having a good understanding of, if this is the arena meta, what sort of champions am I expected to face? What are their abilities? How do their passives interact with each other? How do I pick champions that are good into them, for example, right? Having to know encounters against common matchups, having to know how, and then even for your own champions, how to know what gear sets to use, what speeds to run, what are the most optimal stats to kind of aim for. You know, what kind of relics do you want to put on? And this kind of knowledge is definitely a lot harder to figure out. But we'll kind of go into how you guys can progress in these areas later. And then, of course, there's the micro decisions at a much smaller level. And that's things like, you know, using the right abilities at the right time. Do I open with my A3 or my A2? Do I target this champion over that champion, right? And then a lot more of the smaller decisions that actually can affect who wins in a matchup. But with this basic introduction out of the way, let's dive a little bit deeper and focus on specific areas you guys should focus on in order to advance every role in this category. Now, the first thing is the champions. And this one I think is fairly straightforward, but I do think there is a little bit of a more specific breakdown that is available. I like to refer to this lovely graphic that was made by another YouTuber. Unfortunately, I cannot pronounce their name, so I will leave, well, you guys can see their link down here in the graphic, but I will also leave a link to the channel as well, as long as I remember. But this is a graphic that he made that shows the maximum amount of shards that you can look to get in a month. right? It has the ancients, the voids, the primals, and the sacreds. And honestly, there is a really big amount. Like this is a pretty high amount of shards that you can get, right? Around 100 ancients, 40 voids, 9 primals, and 17 sacreds, right? And this is a representation of the maximum amount, right? So this isn't every average Joe is able to achieve this number, but you should think about this as the cap and look at how you can work towards building up your stack and making sure you are maximizing the amount of resources you're getting. Now, of course, why are shards important? Of course, one thing is, once you have shards, you can pull shards and then you get champions, and hopefully those champions are good in the arena, right? But of course, outside of that, you still have fusions that require shards to do, or hero's path events, or anything else that requires shards that guarantees a champion. Now, if we think about getting champions from shards, we really want to focus on specifically the void shards and the primal shards. Now, void shards come from a variety of places, whether that be demon lord, and that's probably the most common place. But scattered across the game, there are other ways of getting void shards. But specifically when it comes to primal shards, and that's probably the most important shard, especially for an endgame account to be focusing on, your ways of getting them are a lot more limited. You have 4 primal shards that come from Live Arena every month, so that requires you to be focusing on Live Arena. And then you have the other ones that come from things like Hydra Clash, we have Siege, right? A lot of these are very clan focused events that require you to be in a fairly good clan that is motivated enough and coordinated enough to be aiming for these wins in these clashes. And so a lot of your Prima shards, one comes from needing to do the arena, and then two, being in a good clan to support you to getting those extra wins in Clash. Now when it comes to voids, your voids are a little bit more scattered. Of course, everyone should be aiming to complete Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss. That is the avenue that gives you the most. But things like CVC give a good amount on this list, and Doom Tower as well across both normal and hard mode Doom Tower. So Doom Tower is definitely a good place to progress for a lot of extra resources when it comes to shards. Now, when it comes to fusions, we have a lot of past fusions that have proven to be very, very powerful. We have things like Fabian, of course, right? Everyone remembers Fabian. But even before Fabian, we have things like Lady Noelle, who's proving to be a very decent champion, even nowadays. Even before then, all the way back, of course, we'd had champions like Armons the Magnificent. We've had Ancora over here, and we've had things like Ustrid, so on and so forth, right? When it comes to PvP champions, especially those that Plarium focuses on in terms of fusions, they've actually proven to be very powerful and sometimes even meta defining or meta changing. And so you want to make sure that when there is a PvP champion that is coming out in the fusion, even right now, right, we have another PvP champion coming out with the newest Dark Elves Reviver, right? And so when these come out, you want to make sure that you have the resources, especially when it comes to shards. That's one of the biggest like limiting factors of being able to complete a fusion in order to do so, right? Now, of course, when it comes to mythicals, there are more ways than just primal shards to achieve them, and these are through the remnant system, right? So in the summoning portal, we still have remnants, and you can obtain these through the completion of both the Grim Forest as well as Cursed City Heart. These are the last two areas that are very, very important to be focusing on. I know Cursed City Heart is definitely a marathon to kind of complete, and the 40 remnants fragments here are locked behind some of the hardest content in the game, I would say, for any account, and that's these 40 in Soul Cross. Like even this rotation, I think it's fairly tricky. You need some very specific champions with some very specific affinity bases. And I think this rotation is one of the trickiest. I think this stage in particular is very tough. I think this is is this the double Taras wave? I'm not sure. But again, if you look at this, there's very few champions that are actually good. We have maybe Samson that will probably have to carry me throughout this rotation here. But Curse City Hard is definitely something you want to aim for towards, especially Amius, having one remnant summon there that is, I think, fairly accessible in terms of other things. You don't have to get through Soul Cross in order to access Amius. So that's something that you guys should be focusing on as you guys progress later on in your count once you guys are at that stage. Grim Forest Hard, I think, is the easier one of the two because of the whole system of the Curios and the trait cards being able to provide you a lot more stats and making sure that you guys can actually complete this fairly straight easily. Definitely a lot easier to do this than something like Curse City Hard, but again, we have 40 remnant fragments locked behind the purple region. I believe it's like this one and that one or something like that. But again, if you guys are looking for areas to progress, think about Grim Forest, think about Curse City, because when it comes to getting primal or mythical champions, on average, you can get one a year from just the primal shards alone, but the other one a year comes from the remnant system. And so you're on average looking to gain about 2 as long as you aren't buying other primal shards outside. But those are the ways of obtaining primal shards and mythical champions outside of just buying them. Now, let's break it down into your gear. And this is the part that I think has the most sort of narrow focus area, because really when we're thinking about the arena, there are only so many select gear sets that are actually performing very well. Of course, the top one on the list is Mercurial, and this one comes from the Grim Forest again. So again, there's more reasons in the Grim Forest or to progress. Make sure you guys are completing hard mode Grim Forest. That is probably the single most important piece of content that you guys will find in your arena progression. And there's even more things than just the remnant shards and the gear, right? We'll talk about those as we go further. But given how strong Mercurial is on so many champions, it is very important to start building up sets. Even if you're only starting out in normal, you're still at least getting the 5-star gear. But really, you want to do Grim Forest Hard for the 6-star gear. From there on out, I think the second most important is the lethal set, and this is most important partially because of its relative scarcity, because this isn't something that you can farm 24/7. This is locked to the Dark Fae Doom Tower rotation. I believe it was the last rotation of Doom Tower. Right now we're on Frost Spider. I think the next one is, I don't know. I think there's is there Nether Spider? I don't know. I think there's like the dragon and then maybe another rotation, but it's very limited. I think it's 1 in 4 rotations that comes over to the Dark Fae one. But you want to make sure by the next time it comes around that you can, 1, advance up to stage 120 in Doom Tower Hard, and 2, actually have teams to take down the Dark Fae. Now, I don't think the Dark Fae is the biggest challenge itself, as long as you have a decent strategy, especially if you are well versed in arena or at least have an interest in it. You probably have an arena setup that can probably take down Dark Fae. But the idea is when the Dark Fae rotation is up, make sure you are just making your way all the way up, spending your keys every day in order to farm the lethal fragments for the forge and crafting your lethal gear. And then on the last bit, we have a few other sets that come from both the Hydra as well as Curse City, from Stone Skin Protection from Hydra, as well as Merciless and Supersonic from Curse City. Learn from Hydra, I think Stone Skin is still one of the more important sets in the game that I think Mercurial won't. It'd be hard for Mercurial to replace all the Stone Skin just given the limited quantity right now, but maybe in a year or two, maybe there's going to be a lot more Mercurial and a lot less Stone Skin. But for now, Stone Skin is still one of the very important sets to provide protection for your nukers. Now, I think Hydra is fairly straightforward. What is nice in a way is that it's really easy. Like the highest requirements to get a 1 key chest in each of the Hydra game modes is very, very low, right? Only about 40 million damage in Nightmare, and then 30 million damage in Brutal, and it just goes down after that, right? So it's actually very easy to kind of, as long as you have the right champions, and as you progress, it's very easy to hit some of these milestones. So relatively speaking, I think this is probably the easiest one. Now, it's a little bit trickier to get the 1.2 billion every week in order to get the accessories, but you should be focusing on Hydra as well in the background, especially now with the quick battles. It should be something like a 5-minute task every week just to get a little bit extra rewards to progress the gear on your account. Lastly, there is, or I'll talk briefly about protection as well, but protection again is a fairly niche one. A lot more supports are again rotating into Mercurial, but I think there are a select few champions out there that are still very good in protection sets. You know, we have things like Sifi, for example. That's probably the only arena champion I have currently in a protection set. Hmm. Here, yep, we have a full 9-piece protection set on Sifi, but even without it, when it comes just speed sets, protection set is still one of the better speed sets in the game, offering 24% speed for 5 pieces of gear, right? So this is fairly good to have like a 5-piece speeds or 5-piece protection set and a 2-piece speed set, and this is one of the ways that almost maximizes the amount of speed that you can get on a champion. When it comes to building speed, protection set is still a fantastic option, even if you aren't going for the 9-piece protection set. Now, when it comes to Cursed City, there are Merciless and Supersonic. Now, I think this one is definitely waning a little bit in popularity because Supersonic is a lot less utilized. And that's because champions like the Lockout champions that are historically have been put in Supersonic or just swapping that for faster speed gear because there's not as many speed boosters or buffers that go before them. And so Supersonic, I think, is less so of a priority. It's really about Merciless. But then even again, Merciless is a very, very niche set. There are going to be some specific champions that really do want a 9-piece Merciless set. Champions like Rotos, right? And looking at my Rotos, my gear is quite abysmal, especially the accessories. I have 3 5-star accessories. The amulet isn't even crit damage, and you know these are decent, but they're not good, right? You look at my boots, I have a double roll and flat attack. You know, these are definitely very suboptimal pieces that I've built up, and it's very limited. I think it's even harder to farm Merciless gear compared to something like Mercurial because it is split upon Merciless and Supersonic. But it is still important to farm your Cursed City. You know, you still get the Remnant fragments as well. Same with Grim Forest. And I still think there is good reason to do so. But again, there's much fewer champions, I would say, that actually benefit from these two sets. Now, as the game has progressed, we have gotten more ways of actually contributing to the stats of our gear. We have things like glyphs, of course, that have been a staple throughout, but since the release of Faction War Hard, now there's another extra layer on top of that. And then, of course, we have gear ascensions with the oils that come from Sand Devil and Phantom Shogun. I think Phantom Shogun and Sandoval are probably a lot more important comparative to going from Faction Wars normal to Faction Wars hard because of the relative ease of completion. I think it'd be fairly accessible to most players to design a team that can go down all the way to Sand Devil 25 as well as Phantom Shogun 25. I think for Phantom Shogun, there's, 5 rare team that is fairly common. And then with Sand Devil, you can cheese with like a solo Embrius or, the Godseeker Neri team, right? So it's fairly accessible as long as you have the 1 or 2 very specific champions to kind of get down all the way to the bottom here. But it's so important to get to stage 25 so you can start farming Chaos Dust, which is needed in order to re-roll your Ascensions, right? If we look at just a random given piece here, I have accuracy with 20% additional attack on here. And I guess I was lucky. Whoops, that's a bad example. What about this one? It took 2 reworks here to get the speed roll here, which again, very, very lucky. But let's see how many times it took to get the crit. Oh, never mind. What a terrible example. But usually it takes quite a few rerolls. Let's see if I, one, okay, never mind. You know what? Where is my highest? Maybe these. Look at these. It took me 16 rerolls to get speed on top of speed here. And these aren't even good set of boots. Like, these are just okay boots. But this is, I don't know. I don't even, someone do the math of how much Chaos Dust that costs. Because I think it's like 100, give or take. And that's a lot. So you want to make sure that you are getting to stage 25. That, of course, is when you're getting the most oils, but also the best getting access to the Chaos Dust. And then, of course, we have Faction Wars Hard, which released a new set of glyphs that can boost your stats up to an even higher extent. Although I think this step up is a little bit smaller, right? When we have the 6-star speed glyph that gives 3 to 8 speed. Now the legendary 3-star speed glyph gives, 6 to 12 speed. So it's only boosting about 4 maximum speed, but across all of your 7 speed, or across all of your items with speed, you're really realistically looking at roughly like 24 to 28 additional speed, right? Which is a lot, but it's very, very hard to actually get this. So these are the specific areas in the game that you guys need to be focusing on when you are thinking about your gear. And then finally, with some of the newer stuff, of course, we have relics and the gems that kind of go on the relics, as well as the blessings, right? That also give not only a little bit of an effect to your champions, but also a huge stat boost as well. Relics are a little bit scattered. We have, of course, I think, in my opinion, Grim Forest is, again, the #1 star that kind of comes up in this conversation. What is very good about Grim Forest is not only the fact that I think has some of the best arena-focused mythical relics, but also I think Soulmar Crystal is very nice. Spore Burst Rod is less nice, but can still be okay. I don't really care for any of these down here, but these are some of the best mythical relics in the game. And what is also very good about exactly Grim Forest is that every rotation you have the chance of gaining mythical gem slots or mythical gems from the chest as well. So Grim Forest is really just a combination, right? It gives you the Mercurial gear, it gives you the Remnant summons, it gives you the relic fragments, and it gives you the chance at mythical gems. So it's an all-in-one, really focused area. So it definitely at the very top of the list. You guys are gonna be hearing and it even gives like it gives like tokens for like your blessing and stuff, right? So it really is all in one focused area where you get everything you need across every place in Grim Forest. Now, when it comes to other relics, I think the second biggest area is Chimera. Chimera, of course, has Stormcaller as its mythical relic, and that's very, very good right now. But I think when it comes to Chimera, it's a little bit different. It's not the same as Hydra, where just, yeah, if I get my 1-key Ultra Nightmare, my 1-key Nightmare, I'm, doing the best for my account. And that's not necessarily true. When it comes to Chimera nowadays, it's really about completing the trials and trying to maximize the amount of mythical relic fragments that you guys are getting. So for example, in this week, for me, I'm able to get the 9 mythical relic fragments here, and I'm able to get the 7 mythical relic fragments there. So I can actually get 16 mythical fragments this week. Some weeks it might even be 18, 20, possibly more. But it is not super easy to do, so you need to have some very specific champions in order to achieve that, namely something like Lydia with a high blessing, ideally for the Nature's Bounty in order to get the true fear out, and Senna is very invaluable to me to do so. But because you can actually use 2 keys on Ultra Nightmare and then get the relic rewards twice, this is going to be the best source of mythical relic fragments in the game that is farmable. Something like, Grim Forest only gives about, I don't know, 60 to 100 mythical relic fragments a rotation. You can definitely earn much more through Chimera. Like this week alone, I'd earned 32. Some weeks I've gained 40. And so those really add up over time as long as you can do it. So if you're in a stage where you've passed Grim Forest and you want to focus on Chimera, it's really specific champions with blessings that you need to kind of look for and finishing these trials in order to get the mythical fragments. Of course, winning Chimera Clash gives you some extra chance of getting more mythical gems. Really, this is almost impossible to get. Not only is it very hard to win, it's also very hard to even roll a mythical gemstone. So I wouldn't worry about this too much, and I would just focus more so on being able to complete the trials. Now, from there on out, of course, there's other places to gain mythical fragments. You have things like Faction Wars Hard, which is quite important for the glyphs, the other relic pool that it opens up, but you get a good amount there. You have things like the Live Arena, which gives you another 100 a month, or not a month, but 100 every rotation. And of course, we have things like other events. Recently, we had like the Heroes Path, which gave more mythical fragments. We have a lot of the champion training events or the champion chase events that give mythical fragments as well, right? So make sure that if you guys are in a position to capitalize on winning some of these tournaments, you guys take the opportunity to do so. And of course, lastly, we have CVC or not CVC, but Siege that gives you some more mythical fragments. And even if you guys don't get the specific ones from the specific groups, you can still have the chance to roll Volcaria Cart and Hollowed Hilt, which are still two fantastic PvP relics. Of course, your blessings is a little bit more of a grind. There are some chances where you have like a Titan event, for example, you pull 15 sacred shards and you can walk away with a 5-star soul. That's a very fantastic way to do so, because for most people familiar with trying to get from a 1-star to a 5-star soul, that is a long journey. It usually takes a lot of RNG, and it's probably even harder to obtain the sort of soul coins in order to do so. But of course, make sure you guys are farming your Iron Twins daily. That still gives you a chance to get red essence every day. Do double run on Sundays on the Void Affinity. I think that's Saturdays. I'm not actually sure. And then, of course, if there are any events or tourneys that give additional soul coins that you can get access to, I think it's a very good opportunity to do. Now, lastly, I want to talk a little bit more generally about knowledge and micro, because this is a little bit more general and how you guys want to approach obtaining these. I think for me, when it comes to knowledge, if I don't feel like in the mood to like be playing the game, but I'm on YouTube, I'm watching some videos, I do think that YouTube has the best content for Raid Shadow Legends in order to learn and level up your micro and knowledge. I know there are websites like Hell Hades or Yumi Love out there, but I find that really uh, hard to actually gain the important knowledge out of. And there's so much content on YouTube, whether that be for like, a tier list of like, hey, these are the 30 best champions in the arena right now, or these are how you want to build these champions, or these are the specific strategies that you can use to beat certain champions, right? There's so much content out there that ranges from a wide level of variety and can be catered towards different audiences. But it just helps you to build up that foundation of knowledge to say, okay, I know what Bayek's passive does. I know he can be countered with high accuracy, or the death dealer relic works on Bayek, right? Like, these are things that you can slowly pick up over time just by watching videos. And if you guys do have the time, I do think that there is tons of arena focused YouTube content out there, especially even on my channel, right? If you guys have found your way over here, I'm sure you guys are doing good and leveling up your own arena game, and I appreciate you guys for hanging out as well. But again, my go-to would be on YouTube. There are some creators I do like, especially out there, and that are a lot of good content out there focused on arena. And then, of course, there's really no better way to improve your overall knowledge and your micro, because it's really catered towards your own account, right? So what champions you have, that pair well together, right? You want to get a feel of what works and what doesn't. You want to know, okay, if my mercurial set is at 300 speed, but Jay's Galathir is at 370 speed, but mine is only 300, is mercurial still the best set for me at my level? Well, that's almost a very impossible question for me to answer for you, because maybe it works for you, right? You have to get an idea of, okay, if my right, and then like, if my 9-piece merciless set only has these stats, is that good enough, right? And that comes from you testing it yourself at your level of arena, right? I can't tell that for you, unless so happen to be very specifically at my arena level, at my live arena ranking, right? And of course, this is a fantastic way, especially classic arena, to kind of test builds. You can look for some specific champions. If you want to fight a Nell team, if you want to fight a Nice, you can do that fairly easily, I would say. And then, of course, when it comes to live arena, you want to think about things like draft strategy, right? What order you want to pick your specific champions, what champions you want to pick when your opponent picks other champions. Very specific to your account. And there's really no better way of picking up this knowledge than just trying it out for yourself. But that's going to wrap up the focused content for the meta report. I hope you guys enjoyed that section, and hopefully that orients you a little bit in thinking about how you guys want to progress through content in the game in order to focus on PvP. And I want to talk very briefly about the newest fusion. You have Mabar, the Web Diviner, and I'm not going to say too much about this champion. If we want a separate video for that, maybe I'll do that. But I don't get the hype around this champion, especially when it comes in a PvP setting. And it's hard to say because it's a legendary, and then when it comes to talking about PvP meta and how it makes a splash, The benchmark is mythical champions, really. And there have been legendaries that I would say are better than certain mythicals, or at least are in different roles where mythical champions don't necessarily cover, or there isn't really enough of mythical champions to do that. But when you are fighting for a reviver spot, there is so many champions out there that you're competing for, right? You're competing against Galathir, Theodosia, Hilvi, fantastic legendary champion, right? We have Marichka, right? We have so many revivers out there that you are competing for, and you have to be better in some aspect. Now, I think this A1 is probably the biggest part that is probably a little bit overrated. Now, the passive effect I think is extremely strong, so allies under a fervor buff have a 50% chance of joining the attack of other allies under a fervor buff. And she places a fervor buff for 2 turns on her A1, right? I think realistically, this needs to have at least 2 fervor buffs on the field in order to have any sort of effect. And then, of course, it's not even guaranteed at that point, right? But it's just tricky to get to fervor buffs. She has the A1 twice if there are no other champions on the field that apply fervor buffs. And if you do want to run her with Palace, for example, who does place fervor guaranteed, then you have 2 revivers out there that are legendary, that are susceptible being locked out. I think it's very difficult for a support champion like her to place 2 fervor buffs out at the same time, because you also have other abilities you want to use, right? You want to use your A2, you want to use your A3. I think it's not it's super powerful if you can get this active, right? If you have like fervor buffs on all of your allies, and then all of a sudden you're getting like 3 ally attacks in the same turn, right? But it's super difficult to kind of achieve that, in my opinion. Her A2 I think is just not good. She places a strengthen buff and an increased res buff on all allies, then equalizes the HP on all allies. It's just not that good, right? You don't have a cleanse, you don't have a shield, you don't have block debuffs, and you don't actually heal in a sense, right? If everyone's HP is low, you're not boosting your overall HP above a certain threshold. I think that this ability is just not good. Like, the buffs just aren't that great. Strengthen is fine. Increased res is pretty useless, but the overall utility of it is just not there, right? You compare this to someone like Hilvi, who places, who CCs and strips your opponent, and then instead of placing some random buffs, it's just not up there in terms of the power level. And then I think the most awkward part is her revive. She revives a single target ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, and places a perfect veil on all allies except this champion, who instead gets a 2-turn unkillable. Like this, and then these buffs will be placed even if no allies are revived. This is awkward. I think the good part is this is a 3-turn cooldown with granting a 2-turn unkillable, so you can cycle through this, again and again. But it's so awkward because if you use this first, you're not placing any protective buffs on your allies. Perfect veil is fine, but any AoE ability just kind of ignores that anyways. And so you're using your revive skill, not putting something like block damage or unkillable on your champions, and then your team can still get wiped out. So if you want to, but then if you want to wait for this to use as a revive, well, then you don't have any other source of protection in your kit, right? You don't have the 25% damage reduction that comes with something like a Galathir, right? There's no other point of protection in this champion's kit, and she kind of relies on this unkillable in order to stay alive. Of course, there is the 9-piece Mercurial set. But if you want to use this first, you don't get the revive. If you use the revive second, you don't get the survivability. And you don't protect your allies either. Only she stays protected. And so I think this champion is really awkward as a standalone champion. You need someone else in there to kind of support, maybe a secondary reviver, maybe something. But I don't think she's going to work well by herself. I think her passive is probably the saving grace here. She provides a 20% turn meter increase of all allies whenever 8 buffs are received by the enemy team. This is fantastic. This might be the make or break, right? Because if this works with somebody like, if this works with how Queen of Hearts works, right? Queen of Hearts gains an extra turn every time 10 buffs are received by the enemy team. A lot of the times at the start of the game, you're automatically going to get 8 buffs across the board, right? Whether that be Mercurial, Lightning Cage, Stone Skin, whatever buffs that might be, well, Cardiac Heart, right? it's so easy for the enemy teams nowadays to have a buffs at the start of the game. So at the start of the round, before anything happens, she's going to have her passive trigger. All allies are going to gain 20% turn meter. And that's very good for winning like a lockout battle, right? You pair her with a lockout champion, your lockout champion is going to automatically gain 20% turn meter, and you're almost guaranteed to go first, right? So I think there is some very interesting value in that, where her passive will probably trigger at the start of a game around, and you are going to gain 20% turn meter. And of course, this happens again and again, right? So it's very easy to kind of keep your team moving. Like, this passive is very, very strong. And I think that her power level is almost focused entirely in this passive, because I really think all of her other abilities kind of suck. It does give a very good speed aura in arenas. And then I think another thing to note is that she does heal on her passive, but even if she has hollowed hilt, she's not actually able to utilize it and grant fervor that way, right? HP balance doesn't count as a heal. Passive doesn't trigger hollowed hilt, and so she can't actually place other fervor debuff or buffs out there besides on her A1. So I think her passive is a complete saving grace. But I think her kit sucks. And I would be happy to be proved wrong. I think most people should still go for this champion just because. But I don't think that this champion is going to make too big of a splash in the arena meta. Now, lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about just general patch notes. And I know there are some champion rebalances, but really I just want to focus on this one for live arena schedule. And if you guys aren't reading the patch notes, now across the day, every 4 time slots, there will be an additional 1 hour of live arena. And so that just means live arena is open for 4 more hours a day. So I think this is some lovely flexibility in order to just give a little bit more time to players who aren't able to make multiple time slots. And I don't think this is really going to affect the overall speed of how fast you guys queue in the live arena at all, because I think people underestimate the amount of people actually playing live arena. Like, matches get queued so quickly. There's almost no wait time ever, really, when you queue into live arena. And so I think this is just a nice quality of life change overall. And I think something that a lot of people are looking forward. It's not exactly 24/7 live arena quite yet, but it's definitely getting there. It's like 16/24. That doesn't even make sense. But open 16 hours a day. And so make sure you guys find the right time slot for you guys. And hopefully this 1 hour really helps to improve the overall flexibility. That's going to be it for this week's report. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys so much for making it all the way to the end. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy the content. But I really appreciate y'all for tuning in today. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay? Peace out, guys, and take care.